Okay, so you should be seeing on the top of your screen a little note to say that it is recording now. Okay, so my name is Laura. Welcome to Atomic Habits for Coding. Thanks for joining today. And as mentioned, just for those who are joining now, I will be recording this bit. I will tell you when I stop recording. If you'd rather not have your video on during recording, that is completely fine. Just to introduce myself briefly as well. So I am based in Korea. I've been here in Seoul for a couple of years now, and I would consider myself more of a tech adjacent person in the sense that I work in marketing for a webtoon company. I love nonfiction, and I love Atomic Habits. It's my copy over here, and I'm really chuffed to share its wisdom today. And to go over what we're doing today, so we will look at Atomic Habits, which is a book by James Clear. And the meat of his book are his 4 laws. We'll look at those in a bit. I will also talk about coding and my personal perspective on these 4 laws to sort of tie it all together and apply the lessons from the book. And we will finish with a Q&A. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, anything you'd like to share, that is your time then. Now, just to get started. So in the beginning of the book, it sort of starts with atomic habits. And James Clear starts out by explaining how powerful these can be. And the example that he gives is, he notes that incremental progress compounds. And the example he gives is the ice cube, where as you have your ice cube and as you sort of heat up for quite a while, you will not see or notice anything. But after a certain point, the ice cube starts melting. And he also has a concept called the Valley of Disappointment. I'll show you that one in a minute. And what he notes is that a lot of people try to be happy in life, right? Whereas what he notes is that contentment might be the way to go, and to really move away from goals and to focus on systems to continue playing your game. And an example that he gives for his own journey is writing, where maybe people want to be famous, they want to be a famous writer, and then they get upset when it doesn't happen, and then they just give up at some point. And he explains that maybe you need to write every day, you need to practice your craft, and that's how you actually play the game of becoming a writer. And what he notes is, let's say you are somebody who has a big goal. Let's say you want to win the Olympics. And let's say you do actually win that goal. Let's say you are actually the gold medal winner. Your happiness just really lasts for one moment, because as soon as you win that thing, you move away from playing the game. You just have that momentary happiness. And it's not really long-term progress that you value in that sense. And what he notes is that if you want to have sort of a more profound happiness and satisfaction, what you can look at is whenever you have your system up and running, you can feel that satisfaction without having these dopamine spikes. And what he notes is to link your behaviors to an identity. Now, the concepts that he notes in the beginning of the book are the power of tiny gains. And what he says, if you get 1% better every day, you have that compound increase in progress. Whereas if you get 1% worse every day, you sort of end up here after 1 year. And another thing that he notes is a lot of people, as they're playing their game of choice, which maybe in our case might be learning to code, is that a lot of people think that results and what you think should happen is a linear journey. Whereas what actually happens is that for a long time you sort of languish, you don't really see much progress, but then after a certain point you have that exponential growth. So what he really notes in the beginning of the book is, if you want to have a healthy habit that really helps you, such as learning, is to ignore that valley of disappointment and just keep going no matter what. Now, in order to get into the habit formation, what he advises also is to change your identity. So for example, your first step might be to decide on the type of person you want to be, which in our case might be something like front-end engineer, or it might be something like, I want to be a data scientist. And then the way you do that is you prove that to yourself with small wins. So by doing that, you start learning, you have these little projects. We'll get into all of these in more detail. And so, as mentioned, he has 4 laws. His first law is to make your habit obvious. And it might be something as simple as having a diary or having a piece of paper and to physically write down, I will engage in this and this behavior at this and this time in this and this location. And what you can also do is you can stack your habits. So for example, after I do this behavior, I will add on this habit. So for example, after I come home, I will start my coding journey. I will continue learning. And he also notes that actually motivation is overrated. So people always say, oh, I'm not really motivated to do things. I'm not really motivated to get stuff done. But what he instead advises is to really not pay that much attention, but to design your environment in a way that makes your good habit, such as learning to code, obvious. So for example, you set up your environment so that you can see what you need for learning, for studying. And some example that he gives, for example, let's say you're in a supermarket, right? And you didn't actually mean to buy the packet of sweets, but because it's near the cash register, the environment is such that it makes you a lot more likely to get something near the cash register. And another thing he notes is if you are very tired, for example, and you buy things that you shouldn't really be eating, let's say you're on a diet, and let's say you buy a lot of chocolate, you can tell yourself that you're not going to eat that chocolate. But if you have it in your fridge and you know it's there and you have your environment set up that way, it makes it a lot harder to deal with that willpower. His second law that he described is to make your good habit attractive. So for example, if you engage in temptation bundling, what you do is you combine something that you want to do with something that you need to do, because what fuels dopamine is anticipation. It's not actually the reward. And a really cool example that he gives in the book is, let's say you like watching Netflix. Maybe you can tell yourself, okay, I allow myself to watch Netflix on my stationary bike. So I can exercise while I'm rewarding myself at the same time. You can stack these habits. And he even noted somebody who connected their Netflix to their bike. So when they started riding their bike, Netflix started rolling. So it's, you kind of combine your habits with what you want. Another thing that he notes is to surround yourself with people where you decide behavior is the norm. So in our case, maybe if we look at Codecademy, we have forums, we have chapters, and that shared identity reinforces your individual identity. And another example that he gives here, there is a fitness club called Nerd Fitness where a group of people who wanted to work out, but who were maybe quite nerdy, who did things like computer programming, who maybe liked Star Wars, they felt a bit awkward about going to other places, but by having that shared identity, it reinforced that good habit of working out, of being fit. Also, if you have bad habits, he advises to make them unattractive. So for example, if you enjoy smoking or alcohol, to really visualize the downsides of engaging in bad habits. And if you have a hard habit, he notes that it might be beneficial to reframe that. So for example, let's say you find learning to code difficult, you can reframe it in a way that you say, okay, I actually get to learn something really useful that might help me in the future, that might help me have a better career. Now, the third law that he has in his book is to make your good habits easy. And you can do that by reducing your points of friction and to prime your environment. And he really advises to make doing the right thing easy. Okay, so for example, let's say you are often tempted when grocery shopping, maybe you can try something like a meal kit delivery. Or if you know that you're really terrible at writing cards to people, for example, when somebody's getting married or when somebody has a baby or Christmas, to just really have a pre-sorted box of greeting cards by occasion. So that makes it really, really easy to have a good habit of sending people cards who need it, who deserve it. And another tip that he has is a 2-minute rule. So you can maybe try to subgroup your habit into 2-minute increments. So it becomes really, really easy to start and also to stop. So for example, if you have that vague concept to study for class, to study for my computer science degree, you can say, okay, you can scale it down to opening my notes, to opening my programs that I need. And what that does is that momentum is something that gets you going. And if you really have to, you allow yourself to stop after 2 minutes, but you teach your brain that it's okay to get started. And once you get started, oftentimes you will find that you want to continue. Lastly, he says to automate habits. So for example, you can use technology to outsource and to automate your good habits or to prevent bad habits from setting in. And an example that he gives is in certain countries in Europe, he looked at how organ donors were very unevenly distributed, even though the countries were actually very culturally similar. But then he looked at if countries allowed people to automatically opt in by default for organ donation, that really ramped up the organ donation rate. Or for example, maybe you can have a little reminder that reminds you on your phone to start studying. Or for example, you can have, if you find that you're getting distracted a lot, you might need something like a screen time blocking app or even apps that reward you for not using your phone, for example. Okay, and the fourth law is to make good habits satisfying. And one tip might be to make it immediately satisfying, because pleasure teaches your brain that a habit is worth remembering and repeating. And an example he gave was there was a country where people had problems with public sanitation because people were not washing their hands. And the officials came up with a little trick where they intervened with soap. And soap was an immediate reward because it smelled nice. It kept your hands soft. It was just a pleasure to use because it was so bubbly. And as a result, hand washing habits went up, and people, for example, were a lot less sick. And then on conversely, when avoiding a bad habit, you should make that benefit enjoyable. So for example, let's say you're avoiding eating out. What's the benefit of that? So you can say, okay, I have a fund and I'm going to put that money that I would have spent eating out into that Europe fund. So you make that benefit enjoyable. Another thing he has is habit tracking. So let's say you have something, if you have a streak, for example, or if you have an accountability partner, a food log, a diary, if you allow yourself to cross something off, it can be really satisfying. And you can even feel that, well, somebody's watching you, right? So that's maybe why a lot of people go to coffee shops, for example, to study, because they know, oh, I'm being watched. I have to do something now. I can't just sit here and play on my phone. And lastly, he advises to recover quickly when you do stop your good habit. So for example, rather than missing something twice, just, for example, do a bad workout rather than no workout. And it's really crucial for your neural paths to show up, especially when you don't feel like it. Now, I just wanted to talk briefly about my personal atomic habits for coding. So one thing that works for me is I have to write down my goal in my diary. And I really do enjoy checking things off. That is my legal high, if you will. I will have to say I have been struggling with learning when my brain is fatigued. So I feel like you can have all sorts of good intentions, but when you're tired, it is going to be a lot more difficult. I like to prime my environment. So I have a special little table that is just for learning, a special little cushion, and a special spot. So I don't do anything else in that spot. I have earphones. I have some music going on. And I always keep my laptop and my notes and my pencil case out to see. So my habit is obvious. I can't really get away from it. Another thing is I do like to stack my habit. So let's say I come home after work, I get all my chores done, dinner, hanging out with the husband, personal grooming podcast, so all of that done. And then for study time, I have something like a scented candle or incense, some sort of white noise, maybe some fancy tea, maybe some xylitol sweets, and that makes the habit enjoyable as well. Another thing that I allow myself is if I get distracted, I have a piece of scrap paper to take notes so I don't get distracted and I have to do my time. Another thing is I like to check things off and I like to also look at my Codecademy streak. I like to do these meetups also for tracking, and I have enjoyed doing projects for friends. Lastly, one thing that I found useful is to recover quickly. Is let's say I can't really get to my learning station, then what I like to do is if I'm on holiday, I like to review things on the app on Codecademy. Lastly, just as a bonus, what I found is I do have a bit of a tendency to replace habits. So let's say, for example, I'm not in the mood for studying. I suddenly find myself cleaning. So that is definitely something I need to be aware of. And I've also found that at times I just have to switch the entire phone off because it's too distracting. Or I have to study when the husband is asleep. Because when the husband is awake, obviously he wants attention, right? So these are my personal views. And what I would like to do now is I would like to take any questions if you have any. And yeah, let me just quickly check if there's anything by way of bits. And let me just stop recording as well in 3, 2,